Only the government could figure out a way to talk everyone into having something removed from their check that they make a negative 4% on, and everybody fights to keep it in place. And it becomes a political icon. Only in the United States government could they figure out a way to make that crap work. And you guys all just, mess with Social Security.
Hey everyone, over the last few months, I keep seeing this video by Dave Ramsey come up in the videos that YouTube suggests I should watch next. Now, before I get started with this, let me be really clear. I have a lot of respect for Dave and the work he's done. I can attribute a lot of my personal financial success to following some of his principles at a time when others around me just followed the crowd and ended up making some really stupid mistakes with their money. Now, I'm an avid reader, and his Total Money Makeover book was a changing point in my life. But I don't belong to the Ramsey cult who hangs on to every word that comes out of his mouth as if he's the oracle of God. I do think that most of his advice is solid, but some of it needs to be applied like salt on your food. Use it sparingly, or it could mess things up. So needless to say, when I saw this video that kept popping up in my YouTube feed titled, "When is the best time to start collecting Social Security? Dave Ramsey rant," I finally couldn't resist and I had to click. Now, I've already watched this video and I have a few thoughts about this, but I thought it would be interesting for us to watch this unfold together. So here we go.
Tracy's with us in Billings, Montana. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show.
Hey, Dave.
What's up?
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure.
I'm 61 years old, and I keep getting these letters from Social Security wanting to know what I want to do. And, I'm still working. Mm-hmm. I'm on baby step 7. Mm-hmm. I am married. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know, when is the best time to take advantage of that fantastic program?
I sense sarcasm, Tracy.
You would sense correctly.
Okay, so the question that Tracy asked here is, what is the best age to file for Social Security? And I can tell you that of all of the questions I get asked, this is the one question that I'm asked most often. In fact, almost all of the other questions I'm asked are to help lead up to the decision about when to file. What everyone really wants to know is, how do I optimize my Social Security to get the most out of it? And there's always a few things that I listen for when I get this question, and the caller in this case provides some of that information. We already know that he's 61, which means that in a year or less, he'll hit the age where he can file for Social Security. Then he goes on to say that he's still working, he's married, and then he says he's on baby step number 7. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Dave Ramsey lingo, that means that he's debt-free and saving money. So for those of you that have been around my channel for a while, you know that all of this data is used in making an optimal decision for filing for Social Security. So let's keep watching.
Well, I mean, the trick to knowing when to take Social Security is to know when you're going to die. And once you got that figured out, then you can calculate it precisely. Okay. Obviously, the longer you live, the better it is mathematically to take it later, because you're going to get a bigger check for a longer period of time. Okay.
Can I throw something else in there?
Sure.
I was actually intending to, I don't need it, so I was intending to invest 100% of it. However, then I found out that I don't get the full amount if I start early. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, you don't. And the later you start, whether it's 62 all the way up to 70, the later you start, every year you would get more.
All right, so I think Dave may have missed something here. His caller said that he was planning to file for benefits and invest it, but found out that if he files early, he may not receive a full benefit. And Dave says, yes, that's correct. You'll receive less if you file early and more if you file later. But I think what the caller was talking about was the earnings limit. Remember, he's talking about filing at 62, and he's already said he's still working. And if you're under the full retirement age, there's a limit on the amount of earnings you can have. In 2022, it's just slightly less than $20,000. So there's a real possibility that he wouldn't even qualify to receive his benefits if he did file at 62.
Okay. But if you run some math out, you can actually run the calculations on their site. It's fairly easy to do. If you run the math out in your situation and you say, okay, I could take it at 66 or 67 and I would get this amount. Okay. And if I took it at 62, I'm going to get a different amount, X versus Y. You follow me? And the difference in those could be made up almost every time. You can run the numbers on it by taking every dollar from 62 to 66 that you get and put it in a good investment. The investment returns will give you greater than the difference for the rest of your life.
Okay, so now Dave is answering the real question that's being asked here, and it's not what's the best age to file for Social Security. The real question is, should I file at 62 and invest it, or just wait until full retirement age? Now, I want to spend some time here and really dig in. As you know, if you wait until full retirement age to file, you'll receive a higher amount of monthly benefit that you would if you were to file early. For example, if your full retirement age is 66 and you have a full retirement age benefit of $2,000, you could file for that benefit at 62, but you'd only receive $1,500. Now, what Dave said was the difference could be made up almost every time by taking every dollar from 62 to 66 and putting it in a good investment. The investment returns will give you greater than the difference for the rest of your life. So his assertion here is that if you file at 62 and invest it, instead of waiting until 66, the dollars in that investment account would have grown to be worth enough to pay you more than the difference between the age 66 amount and the amount you'd receive at 62. So for example, if an individual hits full retirement age at 66 and their benefit is $2,000, there would be a $500 cut to benefits if he filed at 62. But Dave is saying that if you invest the amount you'd receive at 62, the balance would be more than enough to make up a $500 monthly difference. But would it? Let's look at the actual numbers here. And to keep this fair and as close to Dave's numbers as I can, I'll assume that this is for an individual with a full retirement age of 66, even though that ship has sailed. And at their full retirement age, they'd be eligible for a Social Security benefit of $1,658, which is the average benefit as I'm recording this. So if at full retirement age, this individual would have a benefit of $1,658, that means that at 62, the benefit would be about $1,243, a difference in monthly benefits of $415. So what we need to know is, can this person file at 62, invest the $1,243 monthly benefit, and then have enough at 66 to make up the $415 difference every month? So to do this correctly, we need to add another piece, and that's the annual cost of living adjustments, because those make a real difference. So if at age 62, the full retirement age benefit is $1,243 and the projected benefit at 66 is $1,658, we know there's a $415 difference. But understanding simple math will tell you that a percentage increase has a greater effect on larger numbers than it does a small number. And the COLA is running in the background, so over the next few years, this difference between the benefit amounts will grow. Now, if we use a conservative 2% annual increase, this means that by the time this individual would reach 66, the benefit would be $1,795, which would mean that there would be a difference of $450 that they would have to make up. And that gap would continue to widen as they progress down through retirement. So then that brings up the second assumption that we have to make here, which is how long do we take this out? What life expectancy do we use? So again, to be as fair as possible, let's use the shortest life expectancy that's reasonable. The Social Security Administration has a life expectancy calculator on their website, and if you look at the results, it says that a male who is 62 in 2022 is expected to live until about 83 and 4 months. A female at the same age has a life expectancy of 86 years and 3 months. So let's just use age 83, which is slightly less than the life expectancy for a male or female. But again, I want to be as fair as possible and give Dave's numbers the best shot at actually working here. The next big thing to think about is rate of return on the money that you're investing when you file at 62. Now, I can tell you that Dave Ramsey is using 12%. He's always been a big fan of that 12% average annual return. So let's look at that one first. So if you filed early and invested the $1,243 per month, plus the increases you would get every year from the cost of living, by the time you turn 66, you would have accumulated $68,109. Not too shabby. But now you have to start taking withdrawals from that money on a monthly basis. In the first year, that monthly amount needs to be $450, but by the time you're 83, that amount is $629 per month. And even though you're taking some pretty large distributions, at 12%, your balance never declines. By the time you hit 83, you'd have a few $100,000 sitting there. Now, this is the scenario Dave was talking about when he said you would come out way ahead. But this is if everything goes perfectly. What if returns aren't 12%? The way averages work are never in a straight line. What if we have a few years of declines when you're taking those withdrawals? After the last 10 years of market returns that we've had, I don't think that market declines in the future would take anyone by surprise. So now let's assume things don't go perfect like they did with a 12% return. And we could assume dozens of scenarios here, but let's just keep it simple and assume another flat average. But in this case, we'll use 5%. And in that case, you'd run out of money at age 80. So again, this file early and invest strategy only works if things go really well. Any surprises, and you're going to be worse off. And another big caveat here, this doesn't make any provisions for the spousal benefit. If you have a lower earning spouse that receives part of their benefit from your work history, you'd really need to add that back to the amount you'd have to withdraw from your savings to make up the difference. And depending on the amount of spousal benefit, that alone would likely make any of the file early and invest strategies a really bad idea.
So it usually makes sense to take it early if you're going to do what you're going to do, which is invest every bit of it and let it run. Now, taxation comes into play when you're still working. All those other things come into play.
Dave mentions taxation, which is absolutely a consideration here. We're not calculating in the effect of taxation on benefits, but if you were still working and could figure out how to get your benefits, taxes would definitely be an issue, and really it would just serve to reduce the benefit at 62, which only makes the file early and invest strategy a worse idea.
The basic concept is that you can get a better rate of return than they will pay you by waiting, so that you take the total amount between that 4 years of X number of dollars a month into a good mutual fund. Will then, from the rest of your life, that one account will make you more than enough to cover up the difference between your 66 account and your 62 account. That payment amount, that's what it amounts to. Plus, when you die, that money that's in that mutual fund is part of your estate. When you die with Social Security, nothing! That's what you get.
Okay, so yes, you may get nothing, your estate may get nothing, but one of the big considerations about choosing the right time to file is how it'll affect survivor benefits if you have a lower earning spouse. Just remember, if you file early, your lower earning spouse's benefit is going to be permanently reduced. This is something that you have to think about when you're filing for benefits. And so just saying file early because your estate gets nothing isn't an adequate response here at all.
Like you said, it's a great plan. If you run the numbers out on your Social Security, folks, you will discover it's about a negative 4% rate of return in your life. Only the government could figure out a way to talk everyone into having something removed from their check that they make a negative 4% on, and everybody fights to keep it in place.
Okay, so now Dave has moved into a full-blown rant and is railing against the Social Security system because it's a lousy investment. He said he could do much better on his own. So, is Social Security a good investment? Could you take the money that you paid into the system and do better on your own? Again, let's go back to the numbers here. Let's take someone who was working at age 22 in 1977. They retired in 2021 at the age of 66. Now, over their career, again, to keep this fair, they made exactly the average wage index. With those earnings and that work history, their full retirement age benefit would be about $2,213 if they filed. Now, over the 45 years they worked, they paid in nearly $170,000 in Social Security taxes when you consider both the tax the employer paid in and the tax the employee paid in. So what would happen if they would have invested that money along the way? Well, again, we have to make some assumptions here about investment returns and a few other things. Once the person retires, we have to consider the annual cost of living adjustment, life expectancy, so on and so forth. But to keep things as easy as possible, let's just use the same numbers from the earlier example. And let's assume this individual is going to live until age 83. Benefits are going to increase by 2% per year. And the two rates of return we'll use for comparison will be 5% and 12%. So first, let's look at what would happen at 12%. So from age 22 through age 66, at a 12% rate of return, if you would have invested all of those taxes instead of putting it in the Social Security system, you would have accumulated $2.9 million. And at age 66, you could start making withdrawals to pay yourself the same thing you would have received from Social Security. And in this scenario, you'd have more than enough to pay yourself the same amount that you'd receive from Social Security, and you'd still see your balance growing. In fact, by the time you reached 83, you'd have just over $18 million. So based on this simple math, Dave's right. It would be a better way to do it. But, as we discussed in the last example, 12% is a perfect world scenario. Again, we could go back, look at a lot of different return examples, but to keep this as easy and simple to understand as possible, let's assume that we only get a 5% annual return. And in that case, from age 22 through 66, at 5% return, you'd have accumulated just over $460,000. That would be enough to pay you the same amount that you'd receive from Social Security, but instead of your balance increasing, it would steadily decrease. By the time you reached 83, you'd still have just over $200,000, but if you lived to age 89, you'd be out of money. But there's one critical thing missing from all of these examples, and it's disability, spousal, and survivor benefits. Disability and survivor benefits can protect you long before you retire, with benefits not only for you, but your family as well. And to duplicate that protection, you'd have to also buy disability insurance and life insurance along the way. And if you would have deferred some of those taxes to pay for those insurance premiums, you wouldn't have had nearly that much to invest, and the results wouldn't have been close to the returns of investing at all. You know, when viewed simply, looking at Social Security only as a retirement income program, Dave has a very valid point. The returns from the government on your tax dollars are pretty stinking bad. But this program does more than just provide a retirement benefit. And if you're going to look at a replacement cost, you have to consider everything the program does. Now, ultimately, I think a smaller government is better. I'd like to see people being more reliant on their own abilities to save and prepare and less on the government. But this is the system we have, and I don't think it's ever going to go away to the point where you can opt out and do your own thing, even if you could do better. So if you're watching this and you say, okay, Devin, for me in my situation, filing early for benefits is still the right thing to do, I want you to watch this video next. This is the 5 most common questions on the Social Security earnings limit. This is important stuff to know. If you run afoul of these rules, you'll risk receiving an overpayment notice and potentially have your benefits turned off. So just click this video here and watch it next. I'll see you there.